We build our temples for tomorrow, strong as we know how, and we stand on top of the mountain, free within ourselves.
Wow. I mean, that's not just a beautiful line of poetry.
No,
That is the sound of an entire generation, finding its voice. That's Langston Hughes, basically laying down a new law.
a Declaration of Independence.
Exactly, a cultural and an aesthetic one, all rolled into this one just magnificent sentence.
And that quote, that manifesto, really, it just perfectly sets the stage for the man we're diving into today, James Mercer Langston Hughes. And he was so much more than just a poet.
Oh, absolutely. He was a novelist, a playwright, a really effective social activist, a columnist.
He even wrote operas. And maybe most importantly, he was the key innovator of what we now call jazz poetry. He really was the voice of the Harlem Renaissance.
He defined it. And what's so fascinating, looking through the sources we have for you, and it's a huge stack of biographical, literary, historical information, is how you can trace that voice all the way back.
Back through generations.
Yes. So our mission for this deep dive is it's to move beyond the simple biography. We really want to uncover the specific cultural, political, and personal influences that made Hughes the people's poet.
So not just what he wrote, but why he wrote it that way.
Exactly. How his lonely, frankly complicated, globe-trotting life shaped his commitment to showing the real, unvarnished lives of working-class Black Americans.
Okay, so let's start with a core nugget then, because his sheer output is just staggering. I mean, he was unbelievably productive.
He really was, not just in different genres, you said it, novels, operas, essays, kids' books, but his dedication to just being part of the public conversation.
And that's the key thing, isn't it? He wasn't some artist locked away in an attic.
Not at all. And the best piece of data on that is his column in the Chicago Defender. He had an influential weekly opinion column in this major Black newspaper for 20 years.
20 years.
From 1942 all the way to 1962. It's incredible.
That's not just a literary figure. That's a journalist. That's a political commentator writing week in, week out.
Yeah.
That must have shaped how he thought.
Absolutely. It forced him to be relevant, to be accessible, to be connected to the daily worries and hopes of his readers right through the rise of the civil rights movement. That is what separated him from so many of his, more academic contemporaries. He was always writing for the people.
And that sense of duty, that staying power, it turns out it has these incredibly deep roots in his family history. This is where the deep dive gets really illuminating.
It connects him right away to the very heart of the American struggle, the central conflict of it. Hughes had mixed ancestry, like many African Americans, but the specifics of his family tree are just so revealing.
Let's start with his paternal side, because it really embodies that conflict. Both of his paternal great-grandmothers were enslaved Africans.
Right.
And both of his paternal great-grandfathers were white slave owners in Kentucky.
So his own bloodline contains the entire power dynamic of the country right there, the oppressor and the oppressed.
And he claimed some pretty specific connections, too. He said one of those great-grandfathers was related to the statesman Henry Clay. The other, he claimed, was a Jewish slave trader.
And whether those claims are, 100% verifiable or not, the story he's telling is clear. His family was tied up in the economic engine of slavery and white power.
But then you look at his mother's side of the family, and the story just completely flips on its head.
It becomes a story of radical activism, of liberation. His maternal grandmother, Mary Patterson, was mixed race, and she was one of the very first women to go to Oberlin College,
Which was a pioneering institution.
a hub for abolitionism. And Mary's life was defined by that fight. Her first husband, Lewis Sheridan Leary, he died fighting alongside John Brown.
At Harper's Ferry.
Yes. He was fatally wounded at John Brown's infamous raid in 1859. That's not just a historical footnote. It's a direct, bloody link to the most radical moment of the abolitionist movement.
After Leary's death, Mary married Charles Henry Langston. That's where Hughes gets his name.
And Charles Langston was just as committed. He and his brother, John Mercer Langston, were leaders of the Ohio Anti-Slavery Society. They were major figures.
And after the Civil War, Charles moved to Kansas and just kept fighting. He worked for voting rights, for civil rights for African Americans. This family was at the very center of the struggle.
So you have the man who would write the manifesto for the Harlem Renaissance, literally descending from the people who led the charge for abolition a generation before. He carried that legacy in his name.
But his actual childhood, despite those heroic roots, was really difficult.
Incredibly unstable, yeah, and lonely. He grew up in these small Midwestern towns, Joplin, Missouri, Lawrence, Kansas, His parents divorced very early on.
And his father, James Hughes, he basically just left the country. He went to Cuba, then Mexico to escape American racism.
And that left a huge hole in Langston's life, emotionally and financially. He was raised mostly by his grandmother, Mary Langston.
The same grandmother with that incredible activist history.
Exactly. And she was the one who instilled in him what he called a lasting sense of racial pride. She told him the stories, she passed on the oral tradition, and she taught him he had a duty to his race.
So that's why he always identified with the working-class black experience, not the striving middle class.
It's the foundation of everything. And during that lonely time, books became his lifeline. They were his escape.
I love how he described it in his autobiography he wrote. Then it was that books began to happen to me, where if people suffered, they suffered in beautiful language, not in monosyllables as we did in Kansas.
Wow. That's it, isn't it? The difference between chaotic, silent suffering and suffering that's given dignity and shape through language, that's the core of his entire artistic mission right there.
And his own poetic career got a slightly strange start. He was elected class poet in grammar school in Lincoln, Illinois.
Yeah, and he was very cynical about why. He said he was a victim of a stereotype. There were only 2 black kids in his class.
And the teacher kept talking about rhythm and poetry.
Right. So he said that other kids just thought, well, everyone knows. All Negroes have rhythm, so they elected me as class poet.
It's such a sharp observation for a kid to make.
It's a classic Hughes. He takes this personal moment and immediately sees the social structure behind it. He saw that the very thing they stereotyped him for, rhythm, would become the heart of his art.
Then in high school in Cleveland, he really started to find his footing. He had a supportive teacher, Helen Maria Chestnut.
And he was writing constantly for the school paper, the yearbook, and that's where he wrote his first piece of jazz poetry, When Sue Wears Red.
So the seeds were already being planted in Cleveland long before he ever got to Harlem.
The whole foundation was being laid piece by piece in the Midwest.
Okay, so that takes us from his childhood to the next major turning point. The conflict with his father that, funnily enough, is what gets him to New York.
Yeah, this fight with his father, James Hughes, was about so much more than just a career choice. It was a clash of identities. His father, having fled the U.S., really disliked his own race.
Which Langston just couldn't understand.
No, he'd been raised on this lasting sense of racial pride. He wrote, I didn't understand it because I was a Negro, and I liked Negroes very much.
It's such a fundamental difference.
And his father was, by all accounts, just a cold and uncharitable man. He wanted Langston to study engineering, something practical and far away from the arts.
So Hughes goes to live with him in Mexico for a bit, in 1919 and 1920, trying to get him to pay for college.
But his father just would not support his dream of being a writer, so they strike this compromise.
A deal made under duress, it sounds like.
Completely. The father agrees to pay for college, but only if he goes to Columbia University and studies engineering.
So for Hughes, Columbia wasn't about the Ivy League prestige. It was a ticket to New York, a ticket to be near Harlem.
That's all it was. So he enrolls in 1921. And he's a good student. He gets a B+ average. He's even publishing poetry secretly in the school paper.
But the whole thing, the engineering, it wasn't him.
And Columbia itself was a hostile environment. He dropped out in 1922, and he was very clear why. Racial prejudice among students and teachers.
He couldn't even get a room on campus at first because he was black.
Right. The whole atmosphere was cold and exclusionary, especially compared to the vibrant life he saw happening just a few blocks away in Harlem. The music, the energy, the culture.
So Columbia, which was supposed to launch this engineering career his father wanted, actually just pushed him right into the arms of Harlem.
It did, and that led to what he called his wanderer years. From 23 to 25, he really went out and saw the world.
He did all sorts of jobs. I mean, he was a crewman on a tramp steamer, the SS Malone.
Which took him to West Africa and Europe. This gave him a truly global view of the African diaspora, long before most people were thinking that way.
He spent some time in Paris, had a romance there, worked as a dishwasher. He was living the life of an expatriate artist.
And when he came back to the U.S., he kept doing this mix of jobs. For a while, he was an assistant to the historian Carter G. Woodson.
A pretty prestigious job.
But it took up all his time. It kept him from writing. So he quits. And he takes a job as a busboy at a hotel in Washington, D.C.
Which seems like a step down, but it turns out to be the move that launches his career.
Yes, the legendary discovery story. He was already getting published, but this is what made him famous. The poet Vachel Lindsay was eating at the hotel.
And Hughes just left some of his poems next to Lindsay's plate.
He did. And Lindsay was so impressed, not just by the poems, but by the story. This brilliant young black poet discovered working as a busboy. He told everyone.
It's a perfect story.
It created a huge buzz. And that publicity finally gave him some stability. He was able to enroll at Lincoln University, a historically black university, and he finally got his BA in 1929.
Before heading right back to Harlem, which would become his home.
His true home.
So he arrives in Harlem with the degree, the reputation, the experience. The timing is perfect. And his poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, which he wrote when he was just 19, had already cemented his place.
It's still his signature poem. It was first published in 1921 in The Crisis, the NAACP's magazine.
And the poem is just epic in its scope. It connects the black experience across thousands of years, from the Euphrates and the Congo to the Mississippi.
And that last line, "My soul has grown deep like the rivers," became his epitaph. It's so powerful. And the fact that The Crisis published him so much shows how tied he was to the civil rights movement from the very beginning.
And he wasn't working alone, of course. He was a central figure, a leader, alongside people like Zora Neale Hurston, Wallace Thurman, Countee Cullen.
A whole collective. They even started their own literary magazine, Fire. It was short-lived, but so influential.
Because they weren't just writing nice poems. They were fighting an ideological battle.
A huge one. Especially against the established black middle class, the black bourgeoisie.
Who they felt were trying to be too...
Exactly. Hughes and his friends wanted to write about the low life, the real, unvarnished, sometimes messy lives of working class black people. They wanted to use jazz and blues rhythms, the folk culture.
And they criticized the prejudices within the black community. The colorism, the classism.
All of it. And this whole artistic mission needed a declaration. It needed a manifesto.
Which came in 1926 with his essay, The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain.
This is one of the most important documents of the era. He's basically saying the racial mountain isn't white people. It's the desire within black artists to want to be white, to conform to white standards of art.
To climb that mountain is to lose yourself.
Right. And he argues they have to reject that completely.
Yeah.
And the end of that essay, it's the quote we started with. It's just a powerful declaration of self-worth and artistic freedom.
Let's hear it again, because it really is the cornerstone.
He says, "The younger Negro artists who create now intend to express our individual dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. If white people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, it doesn't matter. We know we are beautiful. And ugly, too."
If colored people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, their displeasure doesn't matter either.
We build our temples for tomorrow, strong as we know how, and we stand on top of the mountain free within ourselves.
It still gives you chills. I mean, that is a generation claiming its power.
And everything he wrote after that flows from this idea. Pride in black identity, cultural nationalism, and using jazz and blues as the actual structure of his poetry.
When we say jazz poetry, what does that actually mean on the page?
It means using syncopation, repetition, call and response, trying to capture the improvisational feel of the music in words. In a poem like The Weary Blues, he's using rhythm and dialect to elevate the everyday pain and beauty of black life into high art.
And his mission was always so clear. He said he wanted to explain and illuminate the Negro condition in America and obliquely that of all humankind.
It was a universal message rooted in a specific experience, and that influence went global. His work was a huge inspiration for the negritude movement in France.
With writers like Léopold Sédar Senghor.
Yes, who became the first president of Senegal. They saw Hughes as a model for how to use art for cultural pride and political resistance. He gave them a template.
So his aesthetic was born in Harlem, but his understanding of the full Black American experience, that wasn't complete yet. His early view of the South, for instance, was pretty flawed.
That's right. Before he'd actually spent time there, he was influenced by some of the negative stereotypes common in the North. His 1922 poem, The South, actually calls the people lazy and stupid.
It's kind of shocking to hear.
It is. But that view was about to be completely transformed. In 1927, he takes this pivotal trip down south.
This is funded by his patron, Charlotte Osgood Mason.
Right, his godmother, as he called her. And she wanted him to go collect folk songs and stories, almost like an anthropologist. She was interested in what she saw as this, pure, primitive African culture.
But Hughes had a different goal. He wanted to learn about the lives of people of color in the South on their own terms.
And the trip was a revelation for him. It was a shock. He was, in his words, astonished by the way people of color endured racism and their life conditions. His perspective shifted from stereotype to deep, deep admiration.
And this trip is also where he partners up with Zora Neale Hurston. They met in Mobile, Alabama.
And the key detail here is that Zora had a car.
which was a huge deal for a black person trying to travel in the segregated South.
A game changer. So they decided to travel together, this amazing team, documenting folk songs, local dialects, everything. They visited Tuskegee, they met other writers.
And the material they gathered was just priceless. He met the blues singer, Bessie Smith. He met an escaped prisoner from a chain gang.
These real, raw experiences went directly into his work. They inspired his first novel, Not Without Laughter, which won a major award. And it also led to the play he wrote with Hurston, Mulebone.
Which became a source of major conflict.
A huge conflict. That play is actually what destroyed their friendship. They had a bitter dispute over authorship and money.
And their patron, Mason, was involved in that too.
She was. It's a really sad story about how financial pressure and ego could just tear these brilliant collaborations apart.
And his relationship with his patron, Mason, also eventually fell apart.
It did. He broke with her because she was just too controlling. She wanted him to be her pet primitive, writing only about the folk culture she found exotic. She didn't want him writing about modern, urban, political life.
And he chose his artistic freedom over her money.
He did, which is a testament to his integrity. But his collaboration with his best friend, Arna Bontemps, that one lasted his whole life. They edited this monumental anthology together, The Poetry of the Negro.
So as Hughes is maturing and the Great Depression is hitting, his work becomes more and more political.
It does, and our sources are very clear that his attraction to communism wasn't really about, reading dense theory.
It was more practical.
It was emotional. He said his interest was born out of my own need. Communism, at least on paper, offered an alternative to segregated America. It preached racial equality and international brotherhood.
Which American democracy was not delivering?
Not at all, and this attraction led him on this incredible adventure in 1932. He was invited to the Soviet Union with a group of other Black Americans to make a film about race in the U.S.
A propaganda film?
A propaganda film, yeah. And the film never got made, but Hughes used the trip brilliantly. He traveled all through the Soviet Union into parts of Central Asia that were totally closed to Westerners.
And seeing people of color there, treated with a level of dignity he never saw at home, that must have been powerful.
It was deeply impactful, and the reason the film got canceled is fascinating. The writer, Arthur Koestler, who was a friend of his, said the Soviets dropped it because they had just gotten official diplomatic recognition from the U.S.
And they didn't want to rock the boat.
They needed to tone down the anti-American propaganda. So Hughes's film was a casualty of high-level politics.
He also worked as a war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War.
For the Baltimore Afro-American, yeah. He was in Madrid broadcasting live, reporting on the fight against fascism, which he saw as connected to the fight for racial justice everywhere.
And then when World War II starts, he was initially hesitant to support Black involvement.
Well, yeah. The hypocrisy was glaring. Why go fight for freedom abroad when you don't have it at home? But he eventually came around to supporting the war.
With a specific strategy in mind.
Yes. He became a huge champion of the Double V campaign. Victory over fascism abroad and victory over Jim Crow at home.
That became a powerful rallying cry for the whole post-war civil rights movement.
It really did. But this long history of left-leaning associations, it eventually caught up with him.
The McCarthy hearings.
McCarthy hearings in 1953. He was called to testify before Senator Joseph McCarthy's committee. It was an incredibly dangerous moment.
A career-ending moment for many people.
Absolutely. And Hughes had to be very, very careful. He stuck to his line that his interest in communism was emotional, not theoretical. He basically said he hadn't read the books, he just felt the injustice.
And there's evidence that this pressure worked. He'd been through a secret, intimidating interrogation even before the public hearing.
Right. And after he testified, he very clearly and strategically distanced himself from his more radical past.
And you can see it in his work.
Oh, definitely. When he put together his selected poems in 1959, he left out all of his radical socialist poems from the 1930s.
Which angered some people on the left.
It did. They saw it as a betrayal. But for Hughes, it was likely a matter of survival. He had to make that choice to keep his career, to keep being able to work at all.
Okay, so moving from that very public political pressure to something much more private. Let's talk about the debate around his sexuality.
Yeah, this is something academics have discussed for a long time. The consensus is that he remained closeted his entire life.
And the reasons for that were practical.
Very practical. He relied on the support of Black churches, Black organizations, the Black press, institutions that were socially conservative. Coming out would have been professional suicide.
So what's the evidence that scholars point to?
Well, they see what they call homosexual codes in some of his poems, like Cafe 3 a.m., There are also unpublished poems he wrote to a man he called Beauty.
But his main biographer, Arnold Rampersad, is a bit more cautious.
He is. Rampersad concluded that Hughes was probably asexual and passive in his sexual relationships, but he did note that Hughes found black men sexually fascinating and preferred them. So it's complex, and the need for secrecy definitely shaped his public image.
While his poetry was what defined him for critics, for the general public, especially later in his career, he was known for one character above all else.
Chissy B. Simple.
Simple.
Simple. The creation of Simple was an act of pure genius. He was this everyday working-class guy in Harlem who would just muse about life.
And those musings ran in his Chicago Defender column for those 20 years.
And Simple allowed Hughes to talk about really serious political things, civil rights, poverty, racism, but through humor and common sense. It made the message accessible, and it protected Hughes from backlash.
It wasn't Langston Hughes, the intellectual preaching. It was just Simple talking in a bar.
Exactly. And people loved him. Those columns were collected into books like Simple Speaks His Mind, and they were hugely popular.
But as the civil rights movement evolved into the more militant Black Power era, Hughes started to seem a little out of step to the younger generation.
Yeah, there was definitely some tension there. Younger writers like James Baldwin saw his work as a bit out of date, maybe too focused on folk culture and not confrontational enough for the new era.
And Hughes had his own criticisms of them.
He did. He found some of the new writers over-intellectual or vulgar. He wasn't a fan of the profanity and what he saw as an overemphasis on criminality.
But he never stopped being a mentor, did he?
Never. He was always trying to help the next generation. He discovered Alice Walker. He was always giving advice, making introductions. He saw himself as a Negro writer, not the Negro writer.
That humility is really something.
It is. And he did try to bridge that generational gap. His last book of poetry, published after he died, was called The Panther and the Lash.
A clear reference to the Black Power movement.
Yes. It was his attempt to show solidarity, but to do it with his own unique artistic skill and control, maybe with less of the raw anger of some of the younger poets.
Hughes died on May 20, 1967. He was 66.
And his final resting place it's just perfect. His ashes are interred under a medallion in the floor of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem.
Right at the entrance.
Right at the entrance. And the medallion is an African cosmogram called Rivers. And in the middle of it is that line from his first great poem,
My soul has grown deep like the rivers.
It brings his entire life full circle. It's an incredible honor, and the other honors are just, staggering. The Spingarn Medal, a Guggenheim, postage stamp, streets named after him. His influence is just immeasurable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, you really see a life that didn't just witness the 20th century Black American experience. It helped shape it.
Absolutely. You have the abolitionist roots, the lonely childhood saved by books, the Columbia dropout who finds his voice in the clubs of Harlem.
He becomes the leader who writes the manifesto for a generation, telling them to define beauty on their own terms.
And he's the global traveler, the political thinker who survives McCarthyism by being smarter and more strategic than his opponents.
He spent his whole life trying to explain and illuminate the Negro condition. And he wasn't afraid of the uncomfortable truths, either within the Black community or in America at large.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. It's about his legacy today. You have this balance in his work between embracing the raw folk culture, the lowlife, and his later advice to angry young writers to be skilled and objective.
So not just shout, but to create lasting art.
Right. So the question is, how does Langston Hughes' life and work challenge artists today who are tackling social struggle? After McCarthy, he could have just written safe, pretty poems for the rest of his life.
But he didn't.
No. He took the anger of the Black Power movement and he refined it. He distilled it into art that would last, like in The Panther and the Lash.
So is the goal to just reflect the immediate anger of a moment, which is necessary? Or is it to do what Hughes did, to try and create something more lyrical, more enduring, that illuminates the human condition in a way that will still speak to people 50 years from now?
He taught us that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't a shout, it's an unforgettable rhythm. And that's something to think about.
Indeed. We'll leave you there, standing on that mountain, free within yourself, reflecting on the enduring power of the poet who dreamed America. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.